Welcome to our monthly Charter School Investor Podcast, What Charter School Leadership Looks Like. I'm Alan Wallstetter, founder and president of School Improvement Partnership, which focuses on data transparency in the charter school sector. Each month, we meet with leaders in the sector to better understand how they land the plane while it's still being built. Our guest today, Tiny McLaughlin, my friend, director of private credit, K-12 facility finance at Ecofin, a hedge fund providing startup capital and facilities financing for charter schools throughout the country. Tiny also serves on the board of Elaine Locke Charter School, a high-achieving K-8 charter school in Chicago. So, Tiny, great to see you again. Let's see, I wanted to start, if I could, with a little bit with your journey, not where you are now, but sort of where you started. And I wonder if there is, as you think about, school growing up, if there's a teacher, a friend, a mentor that inspired your journey into the area of education finance from your child.
So thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. And it's great seeing you as well. So you catch me a little off guard with that, but what I'll say is that, and I've said before, I went to Catholic schools my whole life. In fact, it was graduate school the first time I wasn't at a Catholic school. And the first person on that list would be my fourth grade teacher, Sister Rosaire, who was a tough nun who did a great job of keeping me in line, but at the same time, keeping things enthused. The second one was a calculus teacher by the name of Mike Morin, just a great teacher at Jesuit High School of Tampa. Phil Sanzeri, who was my physics teacher in high school. Those were two subjects I wasn't necessarily the greatest in, but they made the subjects interesting and entertaining. But I tell people perhaps the most important person was a guy named John Spinar, who was the prefect of discipline at Jesuit High School.
Now, how did you get to know him?
I got to know him pretty well. And funny thing is I wasn't a terribly bad kid. I just did a lot of stupid things. And the thing that was great about him is he knew when to reel me in and shut me down and when to sort of let it pass. And that was a great understanding for me, was that one size didn't always fit all. And things didn't have to go exactly by the book. And you had to judge things by the situation, meet people where they were, and adjust. So seems very apropos to charter schools.
Oh, it does. And, you're particularly the meeting people where they are, which, I happen to know you're quite good at. And then I believe sort of taking them to where they want to go, which is kind of exciting. And again, you're in so many different neighborhoods. Well, just building on that, that theme of, your journey, I did notice that, I noticed you played rugby at Notre Dame. And I did mention, that last night I happened to watch a Newt Rockne All-American in preparation for the interview, but also couldn't sleep. So what was that experience like, and how I played rugby at college, and how did that sort of, what do you remember about it? And, even, what is it, what did it leave with you in terms of an idea of, teamwork and leadership?
So interesting you bring that up. Rugby, from my perspective, great, hard-hitting, exciting game. But what really made it for me was, it was a brotherhood. And it was one of those things where you had to trust the man beside you to get their job done. And one of your primary responsibilities was not to let down those around you. And I was very fortunate. Not only did I play at Notre Dame, I played for 16 years after, including some of the top teams in the country, and won the national men's club national championship once.
Oh
So
my.
and I played for the all service team. So it was a great experience. And it was one of those things that enabled me to, um, to, um, go into any city, almost anywhere in the world, and find kindred souls.
Yeah, well, as you talk about that, um, and the reliance on those next to each other, were you a second row?
I was a second row, a lock. I'm one of the only people I've ever met that has only played one position my entire life. And it's a position that rewards, or there's a real advantage to height. And I'll say with that, Tiny, I am 6'8" and 285. I wasn't 285 when I played. I was about 245, but it was a position that I was well suited for and was able to play my entire career.
Yeah, I was a scrum half, and we ran like heck from the those guys. Let's see. Well, I know that you, from what we've talked about before, you served for over a dozen years in the Navy. I think you started as a helicopter pilot assigned to combat search and rescue. So first, thank you for your service. Is that right?
Well, thank you. I was a helicopter pilot in the Navy. And that's where the nickname Tiny comes from. It was my call sign, typically because pilots are not on the larger side. So naturally I was tiny, and it was a great experience. Served on 3 different aircraft carriers, deployed to the Gulf, North Korea. And it was my time in the Navy that really gave me my eye-opening experience and helped develop my passion for better schools for all.
Interesting. Well, when you were in the service, from the with historically quite a few in the service who are leaders in the education sector and in other areas, I noticed they have a different take on what leadership means. And sort of, what was your sense of that? Was it similar to what you experienced, playing rugby, or was it something unique that, the Navy, bring?
So it was a little different. And the biggest reason is that with the military, there's really 2 primary things you have to keep in mind. And the first is the mission, and the second is the people. And so if you don't have a firm belief and commitment in the mission, it's much more difficult to achieve things. And second, if you don't know, respect, and nurture your people, you're never going to be able to achieve that success. And again, it was my time in the Navy, specifically working as the aide to Admiral Matt Gaston at the Naval Training Center, Great Lakes, that were my eyes were opened to the disparities and just the awful state of education for so many low income students in America.
Yeah. And did you did that while you were getting your MBA at Northwestern, or was you were at the Naval Training Center with it?
That was later in my career. But it was also when I was at the Naval Training Center, but it was a few years later. And I went back and I got my MBA when I knew, I was going to be leaving. Probably would have stayed in for 20 plus years. I was having a good time, but, like so many people, I met a girl, and my priorities changed. And Used to be when I would go on deployment, it was all about, well, where am I going? What new exciting place will I be? And then suddenly it became, well, what was I leaving behind? And so changes your perspective.
Oh, yeah. And I think that it's interesting. So many of the things that you've mentioned along the way, relate to, public education, charter school education, particularly this idea of, the importance, for example, in the military of believing in the mission and being able to, in the charter school world, express that. So I can start to see how this sort of laid a lot of the groundwork for your work in public education. I want to better understand how your time as aide to the commander of the Naval Training Center, Great Lakes, impacted your sort of view of public education. How would your work, how did your work there intersect with, students and the community?
So, um, an admiral's aide is a job really unlike anything
Uh-huh.
in the civilian world, in that I was involved in every aspect of the admiral's uh, job. It's a really weird thing in that very early in your career, you're suddenly matched with, sometimes you're in the room with the Secretary of Defense or something like that, and you just feel like just being a fly on the wall in those meetings is interesting. And Admiral Gaston was a passionate about the community and making sure that um, the Navy base was well integrated in, and that it was something that contributed, and it wasn't something apart. And, um, I was firmly of the belief the military, surprisingly, is a very egalitarian place. And it is a place where you can go as far as your talent and your drive will take you. And I had a perception of that for America in general. And I do in general to this day. But what I recognized was there were a lot of kids being left behind that, for no fault of their own, um, by the time they finished third grade, they were so far behind in terms of literacy that the odds of them ever catching up and achieving what they could in life were minuscule. And that's no fault of their own. That's not a matter of you can pick yourself up by your bootstraps. That's a matter of a failing of the nation. And um, my concern was that if this were to continue, that this was a greater threat to the republic than at the time the Soviet Union. And Admiral Gaston felt that way passionately. And part of that was Admiral Gaston was a very rare African American admiral, and he had grown up in Dalton, Georgia, going to quote unquote separate but equal schools.
Mhm.
So he knew the importance of education and was very fortunate to have found some academic mentors and teachers who really believed in him. And he went on to Tuskegee and then to be very successful. But the school district that the Navy housing went into was the worst in the state and was funding at the worst in the state. And Illinois it was a strange thing in that we were like number 10 overall for funding of education, but we were 50 out of 50 for the state's funding of education. It was all local dollars. And we were in one of the richest counties in the state. In fact, the third richest community in America bordered us to the south, Lake Forest, where Michael Jordan, Mr. T, the heads of Motorola, and a lot of the old wealth from Chicago lived. And this North Chicago and Waukegan was immediately to our north. And again, the disparity was amazing. One was getting $17,000 a student and the other was getting about $5,000 a student. And it couldn't be made up. The underlying property value of North Chicago and Waukegan, you could tax it at 10% of the value and you could never achieve what they were at Lake Forest. So it was a real eye opener. And it was the first time, I sort of came face to face with that, and it shook, um, sort of my belief that, everyone has the same chance to succeed.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it's uh, very interesting. So with this understanding of the disparity in funding, which not, which, will resonate with our audience because the education revenue by and large came from local, tax revenue rather than balanced by the state. And we run into that here in Pennsylvania as well. We're leading the league in the minimal commitment to the state
Sure.
to balance out that inequity at the local level. Um, I think it looked like you got involved at Elaine Locke Charter School early on to try to turn that around. So here, you have an idea that things aren't why things aren't right. And you have an opportunity to put some of that, you know, uh, into action. So how did you get involved there to begin with? And what did you find? And what was, and what happened? Because I don't think it was high
So,
achieving when you found it.
yeah, yeah. So I had the opportunity to do some volunteering through a program that brought high potential young people into education without teaching degrees. It was a pre-Teach for America that worked with the Catholic schools in Chicago. And that organization, another wing of that organization, also ran a charter school called Elaine Locke. And Elaine Locke is named that for the first African-American Rhodes Scholar, which was sort of the standard, the vision that we had hoped for. And I had been involved as a volunteer going back to the opening. Um, but when I got out of the military, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had gotten my MBA, but I still had that sort of passion to serve. And I had the opportunity to go there for 3 years, and the school was backed by just some amazing people, including, a big name in education reform by the name of Pat Ryan, who puts together the Ryan, the Ryan Fellows that are where they bring in high potential, typically charter leader or charter teachers, and help them to become charter leaders and share with others. And so I had this opportunity, and the school, when I got there, was almost complete with its second year, and it was floundering, and it was
Mhm.
floundering. And they had hired a principal for the third year who it seemed very likely was not going to work out either. Um, and, you know, there were there was a lot of research done, and goal was to sort of make a very sort of cutting edge, student driven education platform. And that this was going to be, the Chicago lab school in the second worst crime district in Chicago. Um, and what we discovered was you can't have a school like that if people can't read. You know, we had kids coming in pre-K, and they used to talk about the lack of 3-year-old literacy. And it was like, what's 3-year-old literacy? Only being able to recognize 2 letters in the alphabet, only being able to name 3 colors. And by the time kids were up, we were getting kids sometimes in second grade, and they'd been in school for 3 years, and they weren't far from where a, a middle income or upper middle income student was as in nursery school. And that was due to an environment that didn't have books, and didn't have 2 parents with master's degrees, and didn't have someone who was available to take the time and read to them every night, and often was a single parent home. And those were not things that were new. Those were things that we'd known about in the nation for 50 years or more. And, there's a lot of those out there who say that, oh, the problem with education is the kids and the family and poverty. You can't fix education until you fix poverty. And I was always like, yeah, this poverty thing, it came up out of nowhere. It really took us by surprise. We haven't had time to adjust to it yet. And, and the real frustration we had was around blaming the kids. And we thought that was the wrong approach. And what we needed to do is I spent a year looking for what you learn is two things. Is one, we had the NBA dream team of teachers there. We had a transient leadership and not solid leadership. And you realize two things is that the most important person in a school is not the teacher. It's the leader, because a good leader can make even a mediocre teacher incredibly effective. But a bad leader can make the best teacher completely ineffective. The other thing you learned is that if people weren't all moving in the same direction and committed to the mission, then you weren't going to succeed. And this is where I learned, as the old founder used to say, that dysfunction trumps incompetency when it comes to the damage you can do to an organization. In that, even the most successful person, if they're poisoned, they're worse than somebody who's incompetent. The one who's incompetent isn't moving you in the right direction. The one who's dysfunctional is actively tearing down the organization.
Well, how, I understand you're on the board now. So how did, when you had the leadership and, helped articulate the vision for the school, how, as a board member, do you think, is some of the good ways in which you found to support the school leader? Because that's an issue that a lot of board members, reckon with, trying to, they don't want to micromanage, they don't want to run the school, but, they are trying to figure out the right way to be part of the solution.
So I will say that we turned the ship at the school when we found the right leader. And finding the right leader is not always where you think you will. And, I went and I searched some of the most successful Chicago public schools for the right leader, and those that had been great for working with high poverty students. And what I found in most cases were I wouldn't let those principals teach my worst enemy or lead a McDonald's. So leadership is the first and most important aspect of this. We found a very non-traditional candidate, a woman who was an attorney who moved into teaching in the Chicago public schools when her kids started in the Chicago public schools. Both of her kids went on to Ivy League schools. And then when they left, she was ready to become a principal. And it was a very unorthodox choice, but she had a mission and a vision, and she was willing to go and stay the course, even when it wasn't popular, even when people were downright upset with her. And as a board member, I think that there are two sins of boards. One of them is that you don't do enough. You're just phoning it in. But that's not nearly as bad as you're trying to do too much and you're not letting the leader lead. And so, I tell most people, if you do only 4 things as a board, you can be a very good board. The first one is, know and review your financials and make sure the school is on a competent track for where it's going to go financially. The second is make sure that the policies and procedures that you have. And I should say really the policies that you get into policy that says these are the values that we are willing, that we believe in. Are we spending money in accordance with those? And do we have a leader that's committed to those? The third is, getting the right leader and holding them accountable, doing an annual review, updates on them, having them, if you're having a board meeting and you're spending more time talking about the pickup line, which is often parents' number one complaint, than you are about how you're performing academically and how you're performing on your mission, you're doing something wrong. And doing a solid annual review on that person and setting the goals with them and making sure they're achieving them. And then the fourth one is get the hell out of the way. Your job is not to run the school. Your job is to make sure the school's doing what it needs to be doing and holding that leader accountable and letting them lead.
Y-
And those are the four things I say that make a successful board.
Interesting. Well, as you say that, it makes me think about how ECOFIN, when you look to do charter school lending, I wonder, how that learning, influences what you look for in leadership from your charter school bar.
Okay. So, let me say that, where I cut my teeth doing this in a school, and then I joined the board for a long time, and I was able to get back into it because I was asked to go work in investment banking at a firm named Ziegler. Just a strange opportunity came up. The CEO of investment banking and I knew each other, and he knew I knew something about charter schools, and one thing led to another. But perhaps the most interesting fact on that is the very first opportunity I worked on it with you. The Inner City Education Foundation schools out in Los Angeles. And another interesting thing about that was they had rugby as a core part of their program.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So-
And I know they had some women play who, on,
Oh, they do. They have a woman who's playing for the World Cup
oh
team.
my heavens.
And, yeah. And they've taken their kids all across the world, with the perspective that, rugby is not centered on Central LA. It's centered in places out of the United States, and it can expand your worldview. But that said, I look for a couple things in a school. When it's all said and done, it's all about the culture. And the school leader builds the culture or destroys the culture. And there's, and culture is not a soft thing. Everyone kind of says, oh, that's kind of soft and squishy. I say the best example of culture is the United States Marine Corps. If you ask a Marine, when they do something, particularly if they do something that's hard or challenging, well, why do you do it? Because that's what Marines do. Because that is part of their identity and who they are and the level of commitment you have. A great school, you see that throughout the entire organization. You see it from the leader and putting together a small number of goals. You see it from the teachers in them making those a priority and having an absolute commitment to the children they serve. You see that when the kids understand what it is their goal are and they're moving towards that. And you see it when the parents believe in it and support that. And it's very noticeable when it's there, and it's very noticeable when it's not, when everyone's moving in different directions. And it's not about, or all the halls perfectly quiet during a passing period, or is everyone working a straight line? No, it has to be organic and authentic to that organization, but it has to be everyone's all in on it.
Right. Yeah.
And you see that, or it's very obvious when you don't.
Yeah, well, so that's one element of what is a good charter school, strong, mission, and it sounds like, and culture. And unless I miss it, ways in which that culture is made clear to whether it's, the teachers, the students, the families, probably even the community.
Yeah, and it's not about whether they know it, it's whether they embody it, whether their actions and whether when nobody's looking, they're doing the things that they say that they're committed to. So when I look at a school from an investment perspective, and let me just say that when you do those things, the other things tend to work out. You know, occasionally you'll have just a wrong focus. You'll be focused on too many things, or you'll be focused on the wrong area. And quite frankly, I've learned the hard way that literacy is the first thing and the most important thing. And if you don't have good literacy, nothing else will work. You won't be able to achieve the numeracy, and you won't be able to achieve the science or the social things. So if kids don't have that, they won't be successful. But, the teacher has to, or excuse me, the principal has to have tangible and measurable results that they're shooting for, and they're measuring, are they achieving them? And those have to be, they have to be um, goals that are striving for excellence. They can't be mediocre goals. And what you'll find is that if you think kids will succeed or you think they will fail, they're going to live up or live down to what you think it's going to be and what you commit to. And you had asked about leadership before, and I was fortunate to work with some great leaders. I probably learned more from the really crappy leaders that I have in a lot of ways, just what not
Hmm.
to do. But dropping back to the Notre Dame thing, Lou Holtz had a very elegant way of saying it, about leadership. He said, you got three things. If you can answer three questions the right way, you can be successful. The first one is, can I trust you? You have to demonstrate every day that you can trust them. And particularly in communities where kids have been abandoned so many times, where people came in and they were going to do great things and then they weren't there anymore. So can I trust you? The second is, do you care about me? Do you care about me as an individual? Or am I important to you? Will you change your actions to help me? And the third one is, are you committed to excellence? And if you're setting mediocre goals and that's what you're trying to achieve, or even if you're setting high goals and you're not systematically working towards them and measuring, are you getting there, and accepting when you don't, then you're not committed to excellence. And when you have those three things, schools will succeed. And that's what builds culture.
Absolutely. Well, you and I know that, particularly as you're talking about creating a successful culture and leadership, using the military as a model, given, my trust with you and the other elements of having worked together. You may, I know recall that I called you probably over a year ago. I was working on a charter school startup in Little Rock, Arkansas, that would train high school students to either join the military or become a first responder as an alternative. And they had no students. They simply had a vision and a strong leader. And this is one thing you haven't said about what you've done and what you do, but you came in and completely structured around an empty church, a $13 million financing, and we didn't have any students yet. A school that is actually opened last month, right on time with a full ninth grade. So you sort of came in and I don't know, how did you put that together in such a way that it would this idea would be financeable.
So let me step back for 1 second and say where Ecofin works. And as you know, there's a very robust, charter schools don't get facilities. They're on their own for figuring them out, and they have to take it out of typically the operational dollars that they get to do that. So facilities are always difficult and they're always on a tight budget. And there's a very robust market out there, a bond market that last year did about $5.5 billion worth of new financings for schools that are established or established schools that are building a replication, a new school, the KIPS of the world, the ideas, the success academies. There's a lot of people who want to be involved in those. The trick is where a school most needs that is when they're new and they're nobody and they can't open if they don't have a facility. And in those cases, a specialty investor like Ecofin is who steps in and handles it, or doesn't, and I certainly have walked away from more opportunities than I've taken with schools. And so, probably on an order of 10-1. And so what the school, Arkansas Military and First Responders Academy in Little Rock that you brought me, had just some amazing things about it. And this is what I look for when I look at a school like that. Do they have a financial and an enrollment plan that will enable them to pay back the money you lend them? It's great if you got a great mission. It's great if you want to make sure your kids get the best. But if you have a plan and you're only going to bring in $1 million a year of revenue, and you want to have a $20 million building that would require, $1.5 million to $2 million a year of interest payments, that's just not going to work. You have to be realistic. And then you have to demonstrate that your plan and you have the credibility to achieve that plan. And people's backgrounds are very important. And one of the things that's so important is do you have people on board who've done this before? Silicon Valley used to say that they, rather than an MBA, they'd prefer somebody who's been to a failed startup. And, that's your MBA in Silicon Valley is, have you been in a startup that's blown up or one that's succeeded, but often blown up because that's where you learn the real lessons. And so you got to look for someone that has experience with the real challenges of opening a school. And it's not a question of if there are going to be problems. It's a question of when there are going to be problems and how are you going to overcome them? And do you have the team that has both the integrity and the credibility and the capability to do that? And you guys had that, nailed down. The people you had involved, Colonel Smedley, you had him coming in, Marine Corps colonel who was coming in to take over the school, be the commandant. Amazing guy. You had a great model that you were replicating. The New Orleans Maritime and Military Academy that was really put together under the leadership of Paul Vallis, who was the superintendent of New Orleans schools, and Colonel Schaefer down there, another Marine colonel who started that school up. You were involved in giving them guidance, and you were really the nexus that, one of the great things about you, Alan, is you're surrounded by great people and know how to pull the team together. And I saw you do that. And then you had a great educational leader who was committed to getting the little things right there. And you had other people who were betting on you, most specifically, the Walton Foundation had asked you to come there and build this school because they said, we really need this. And then you had a community that really desperately needed what you were offering. And all those things aligned to say, hey, this is a school we can get our arms around. It is a risky proposition, particularly since the timeline on it was very challenging, because there was a lot of work that needed to be done at that school to make it so it would be suitable for what you were doing, and it was going to be expensive. Um, but people put their heads together. They got outside expertise and outside support when you needed it. Um, the Walton Family Foundation, their quote unquote in-house developer, came in and did some amazing things for you. And that added a lot of credibility to things. And, unfortunately we were involved, and I think we helped, um, give the state the confidence that the state of Arkansas, that you were going to be open and be successful. And as I say to everyone, when things finally came around, and, um, we weren't the best option for you. And I encouraged you, and I said, you shouldn't use us when we're not the best option. And I appreciated the loyalty and the opportunity to do this. But the Walton family came in with money and said, hey, we'll do a lot for you. And I said, can't turn them down. You can't turn them down. So, my
Right.
goal
Well, a
is
lot,
always to
the
pick
pieces
the
that were in
things.
place first, that was a great sort of specific example of the pieces that were important for a charter school to have in place for an EcoFin to be interested. So, that I think is good to know. And I think that the part that may be missed is just sort of your ability to, look beyond. Maybe it goes back to trust, but both of us, we care about people and we want to treat people fairly and all that. And for you to basically structure it and then be willing to walk away if there was a, financial alternative that might make even more sense for the school was sort of incredible. Tiny, one last question I had for you. I know we've read some books together. One I'm reading now by Abraham Burgess is called In Cutting for Stone. And he has this quote in there: you live life forward, but understand it backward. What is it that you understand now as a leader in the charter school finance community that you wished you knew sooner?
Two things. The first one is that I have a standard for all boards. And that is, um, do you have somebody on that board who is capable, knowledgeable, that is willing to do the hard thing, like fire the inspirational leader if they're not getting it done? Um, who's so entrenched in the charter school that no matter what happens, they're going to be there and they're going to see it to resolution. Um, because the social capital hit, or their own personal reputation would be so damaged if they walked away. So it's sort of not just, is that person capable, wherever, but is their level of commitment such that they can't walk away? Sort of the Cortez burning his ships behind him so that they had to move forward to succeed. And the second is that, and this was the harder one for me to learn, which was, it's not just about vision. Having the right vision is a great thing. It's about execution. It's about doing the 10,000 little things correctly every single day. Uh, and that again comes back to leadership. Leadership having the humility to know they can't do it all themselves, that they have to get everyone on board to do it, but that they are going to, they're going to make sure that all the details get done that make that vision work while never taking their eye off the prize, so to speak. So that was a harder lesson to learn. And it's one that I had learned in the military, but I didn't recognize the level of importance in the schools.
Absolutely. And as the world changes, there's more to that and different applications. Well, Tiny, thank you for being so generous with your time and insights. This is what charter school leadership looks like.